It's time now for the Sports Objective Podcast. No talking heads, just guys who love sports. Here's Dave Richmond.
Welcome into the Sports Objective Podcast. I'm Dave Richmond, along with, ladies and gentlemen, Kyle from LaGrange Barber. How are you, sir?
Going on, Dave? Big stuff.
Happy weekend to you. I know you've got big plans this weekend, right?
No, not really.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I know a man that does have a lot of plans, and that's a man that's the best multitasker I know, Bubba Rosenbaum. How are you?
I don't know about that, but I definitely am multitasking at the moment, working a Concord A's and Lake Norman Copperheads, the Southern Collegiate Baseball League game. We just started in inning one of game 2 of a doubleheader.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll tell you what, Bubba and Kyle, we have an amazing, can I say big show? Can I say that? Kyle, is it okay for the two guests we have on?
Oh, I've already said it, but yeah, it is apropos. You love adjectives, and they certainly apply today for this one. As we have the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, Mike Aresco, who obviously we have a lot of questions for him with COVID-19 and the start of college football season, and if there'll be a season, and if there is a season, why you better get your previews, because, ladies and gentlemen, after we talk to Coach Aresco, or Commissioner Aresco, we have the one and only, the king of college football, Phil Steele.
Yes, sir. Not related to George the Animal Steele, I don't think. But if you're a wrestling fan, you'll get that reference. Anyway, we love both guys. And Bubba, I know that we want to do a roundtable, and then we have two great interviews, so we'll get into those quickly. But there are some news and notes we want to touch on a roundtable real quick before we pitch it to Phil Steele.
Yeah, let's start close to home. Yesterday, or not yesterday, but on Tuesday the 14th, and the decision was made to pause East Carolina athletics, and then that took effect on Wednesday the 15th, and it has since come out that will continue through the 22nd, if not longer. So we'll see. Hopefully it will extend to the 22nd and not beyond.
Yeah, I was just going to add quickly. I was going to pitch it to you guys. Wouldn't you think that it'll be smart to wait to the beginning of August anyway, because that's when we have fall camp anyway. So I know they haven't had a lot of times where we haven't had any spring ball and football and all that, but I think it'll be smart to wait until August, and that way things will be better as far as we'll talk to the commissioner obviously about this, but the trends of everything going around the country, and also that's really when the rubber meets the road as far as college football is concerned anyway.
Well, John Gilbert made the announcement already, Dave, that they're going to try for the 22nd. So I'm hoping we can get back out there and start back working out on the 22nd. To me, the sooner the better. The virus isn't going anywhere between now and August 1st. So get out there and start working out as soon as you can. And so hopefully, I don't know exactly what the protocol is. Why? My guess is they're waiting a week to make sure nobody else tests positive that was essentially exposed. So hopefully we'll be able to get back out there on the 22nd and get back to working out. And then, like you said, actually, I don't think it's the first. I think we can begin practice on the 29th, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought it was the 29th. I believe that's actually the 31st.
31st, okay. The 31st, we can begin practicing for college football, provided there is college football. So
right, I'm just saying the beginning of You know what I mean by the fall camp.
Yeah. Yeah, and we need all the workout time we can get. So if we can get back out there and start working out the 22nd, let's do it. And hopefully there'll be fall camp. And then other news of relevance. The CAA announced that they're not going to play football this fall, and that affects a lot of schools, and that we're familiar with, William and Mary, Richmond, et cetera, and of course James Madison. And James Madison has made the call to play an independent schedule if we have football this fall. That they're not gonna fold things up in like the rest of the Colonial. They're gonna try to play football. So the Dukes taking matters in their own hands.
Let me ask you guys this. I know, Kyle, that they wanted that basically James Madison wants to be in Conference USA. I'm not talking about expansion right now, other than by doing something like this, does this separate themselves again, because they really are the cream of the crop of the FCS, where they're so close to. I know they've had offers from. I heard they had offers right from the.
They had a chance to go to the Sun Belt, and I think at the time they didn't think it would be a good fit and turned it down. I think that was a mistake on their part.
Yeah.
I don't think Conference USA really is any more prestigious than the Sun Belt anymore. That's not a knock on Conference USA. It's just the way things are.
Right.
I don't know that it separates them, Dave, but it does show to me that they have a different mentality, and for lack of a better term, maybe have outgrown the Colonial. They're approaching things like an FCS program.
Right.
They want to play. They want to play football. So yeah, it may be time to move on. And
that's just what I took from it.
Yeah. It's the same thing. We're saying the same thing, just saying it different.
Right.
Yeah, they should. Now's not the time for that, but
no.
A couple of years from now, yeah, you may want to look to move up. And also, we talked about this already on some of our live shows on Facebook that Norfolk State is not going to be playing football this fall because the MEAC is not playing ball, and that affects East Carolina's schedule. So we're down to 11 games. It'll be interesting to see if we play a 12-game schedule. And as you'll hear when we talk to Mike Aresco, it may end up being conference only.
8 or 10 games, right?
Yep.
So it's going to be fun. And then with everything going on with the season, I think it's going to be interesting to find out about the very fact of playing in the fall. Do you play with no fans? Do you play? There's so many. I think the thing about this whole situation is there's so many moving parts. It's so fluid, and there's so many things you don't even think of, and all of a sudden, like, just something every time you turn around, I don't really care about it. I did as a kid, but the Rose Parade, this week they announced they canceled that. It's like all these things that are even outside of sports, you're hearing like are not going to happen. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and the Rose Bowl announced that they would play the game as of right now. So, but you want to go ahead and go to Aresco or Phil Steele? You want to do Phil Steele first? Okay.
Yeah, we had an opportunity to sit down today, being our weekend podcast. We had a chance to talk to the legendary, the man that needs no introduction. Let's go to that interview with Phil Steele right now. Well, anytime you can have our next guest on, Kyle, we're very excited because he's definitely the guru when it comes to college football magazines. Ladies and gentlemen, a man that needs no introduction, Phil Steele. How are you?
I am doing great. How about you, gentlemen?
Well, we had you on because we know that you have a crystal ball, and you're going to tell us we're going to start August 29th against Marshall, right?
That's right. That's when we're starting. Season start on time. Everybody plays, and that's what we're hoping for, right? And I really think that we are going to have a football season. If it turns into conference only, that's fine for my magazine purposes because all the orders that I have in the magazine are projected for conference finish. But I'd like to see some of these non-conference games happen as well.
Phil, before we get into looking at the season, how problematic was this for you to put this magazine together with no spring ball or very limited spring ball, and obviously it pushed your date back into late July? So what's this been like for you versus other seasons?
Yeah, it was definitely different. We normally send the final page to the press the last week of May, and this year I'm sitting in an empty office because the state of Ohio shut down, and I'm just toiling away by myself for 2 months, and there's no way we're going to get this thing out by May the 30th, not having the same type of quality that we put into the magazine every year. So I moved the date back to July the 8th for the final page to go to the press. The staff was able to return. I started talking to coaches. I started getting excited again. We talked about 110 of the 130 head coaches out there. And we got the magazine off on July the 8th. Now, another change caused by COVID is the fact that we normally send out 200,000 of these things and put them everywhere. And I made that decision in March that I was going to cut down the distribution. I was only going to print about 30,000. Then Books A Million and Barnes & Noble contacted me, and they said, hey, we need your magazine. So we're going to be exclusively in Barnes Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, those two places exclusively this year, and then you can also order it through the office at philsteele.com.
And I believe I saw on your Twitter today, I hope it was today, I hope I'm right, that if you get that order today by 1 p.m., well, never mind. We're not live.
Yeah. Basically, if you order it any day of the week before 1 o'clock Eastern, we ship it out that day. And it goes out priority mail, so it'll be there 1 to 3 days.
Excellent.
Very excited. I know that Bubba, one thing that I can say, Phil, is Bubba and Kyle always fight on who's the first to get your magazine. So I don't know. That's a toss-up on who's going to get the magazine first. And, by the way, and they stay up all night reading it from cover to cover. And then certainly I'm very excited.
Dave, I think calling it a magazine's a bit underplaying it. It's a novel, is what it is. It is huge every year, guys. And I'm sure everybody who's listening buys the Phil Steele College Football Annual. But
yes.
If you never have, you definitely should, because there is so much information in that thing, and that's what's so cool about Phil's book. I love all the information, because personally, Phil, I don't trust anybody's opinion more than mine. But your book just gives so much information where you can form your own opinion about everything.
Yeah, and I like to feel it's like 130 different media guides rolled into one, except a lot better, because all the information is on the same spot on every page. And, a lot of folks out there are saying, hey, magazines are going by the wayside. You can look up stuff faster on the Internet. That's not true with my magazine. If I said, who's the starting left tackle for UCF? What was the score of an East Carolina, South Florida game from 3 years ago? What was the record of Ohio State in 2013? And ask you 10 questions like that. You can look it up in my magazine. You know exactly where to look on each page for each stat, and you'd look it up in about a minute. If you went to all those teams, all those schools' websites, you're probably 10, 15 clicks away from finding the category that you want, because they're all set up differently. It'd probably take you 20, 25 minutes to look up all that information. So we're actually faster than the Internet. And if you're a radio guy, you got to love the quick, easy reference for each team.
Yeah, no doubt.
No doubt about it. And, Phil, I wanted to ask you, I know that I saw recently, speaking of the coaches you talked to, I think you said 110 the coaches. Our coach, obviously, being Mike Houston, I know that I saw a tweet that you put out that he talked to you for about an hour. I just want to get your take. I know that you like Mike Houston. Obviously, we're huge fans of the podcast. And I don't know anybody, and if they do, then please let us know. You can find us on social media that doesn't like Mike Houston. What were your thoughts on Coach Houston? And we think he's going to turn the thing around. Yeah,
he absolutely is going to turn around. I remember talking to him last year, and not knowing, I hadn't talked to Coach Houston when he was at James Madison. One thing he did fill me in on last year, guys, was that James Madison was going to have a pretty doggone good defense last year, and guess what? There they were in the FCS title game, and they were actually favored in the title game over North Dakota State, which tells you a lot about how good that defense was. But talking to Coach Houston, the first thing that struck me was that it was going to probably be a 2 to 3 year process on the defense, because he values size on defense, and they were built for more small, speedy guys. And even last year, they had a veteran unit coming back on the defensive line up front, but still allowed 5.1 yards per carry. I think it's going to take about 2 to 3 years to get the defensive line and the front seven on the defense where he wants it to. And offensively, he'd prefer to run the ball, but we saw at the end of last year, guys, putting that football in the hands of Holton Ahlers and letting them throw the football turned out to be pretty good down the stretch. East Carolina put some points on the board those final 4 games. So I think he's going to do a fine job rebuilding this team. And I believe it had to be rebuilt, and rebuilding it into his own, the personnel that he craves. And when he does, I mean, you saw what that James Madison defense did last year, the one that he built. I think we're going to see this East Carolina defense get to that same type of level. But it's not an overnight thing. So that's the one thing I want East Carolina fans to know. Mike Houston will get it done, and he will get it done shortly, but cut the guy a little slack these first couple of years. It was a rebuild process.
Yeah, and one thing, you mentioned the offense. We do have a lot of pieces back on offense with Holton Ahlers, C.J. Johnson, Sneed, another good little receiver. Got the running back transferring in from Arkansas. How good do you think East Carolina's offense could be?
They're going to be good. I mean, you go back to last year, the last 4 games, they put up 37.2 points per game despite facing a couple of ranked teams. And, Ehlers only had a 7-7 ratio after 7 games last year. Then really came on, or after 8 games, I should say, then a 14-3 ratio in those final 4. You touched on it. Chase Hayden being added to Darius Penix and Mauney at the running back spot gives them good depth. And Snead, Johnson, and Blake Prohl, let's not forget about him. He's a guy that can play inside and outside. Quality at the receiver position. You need a good offensive line, and I think we're going to see a better offensive line this year when you've got like a left tackle like Deontay Smith is a guy that could possibly be drafted this year. He's got that NFL possibility. Fry and Bailey are back on the O-line. So I like this East Carolina offense. I think they're going to much more resemble the offense we saw in the last 4 games than they did in the first 8 games last year when they struggled at times.
Yeah. And Phil, I wanted to ask you, as far as one of the things that the question marks have been, obviously, with the offensive line and defensive line, but we'll talk about the defense in just a second. We love Coach Shankweiler. They might as well have a statue outside for him, outside the stadium. He's been there, the 5th head Carolina over the few decades, where he's come in under different coaches. But what are your thoughts about the offensive line? Do you think that we'll see improvements there?
Yeah, this is the first time the seniors have had the same offensive line coach in back-to-back years. So that's a nice plus to have. So you got the same coach, you got the continuity, and you got 3 seniors up front. Fry, Bailey, and Smith are 3 seniors. They've been through the wars together. So I think that continuity of the coaches, the continuity of the offensive line, it's all going to help this year.
Yeah, and we'll move on to somebody else here in a minute. One more East Carolina related question. If we play a 12-game schedule, and we're already down 1 game, Norfolk State, the MEAC canceling football for the 2020 season. So right now we're at 11 games. Who knows if we'll play conference schedule or what? But let's pretend we replace them with another FCS. If we play 12 games, what would you say our cap is? Best case scenario.
Well, I don't see a winning season for East Carolina this year. I think it's year 2 of the rebuilding process, and the schedule's tougher this year. Last year the 4 teams that East Carolina beat, Gardner-Webb, William & Mary, Old Dominion, and Connecticut, those 4 teams combined to beat 1 FBS team last year. So those are pretty much the gimmies on the schedule. Now, I like the way East Carolina competed with teams like Cincinnati. Probably should have beat Cincinnati last year. SMU took them to the wire. So they played well with the big boys. But you look at the schedule this year, it's tougher. They don't have those type of 4 opponents on the schedule. And if Norfolk State comes off, they'll probably be an underdog to Marshall in the opener, an underdog at South Carolina, underdog home against UCF. I think East Carolina will be favored at Georgia State, although Georgia State's still got a pretty good team, and they were in a bowl last year. At USF is one of those games I think East Carolina can go on the road and grab. And one of the reasons is South Florida is a team that's got a first-year head coach, very few spring practices. So that's one advantage East Carolina's got there. I think that's going to be a key game for them. But they'll be an underdog against Navy, probably an underdog at Tulsa, perhaps an underdog against Tulane. I like what Willie Fritz is doing there, but that's a toss-up game, a winnable one. At Cincy, at Temple are going to be tough, and then SMU at home. So I think it's going to be tough to top last year's 4-win schedule, or 4 wins this year. But as mentioned, I've got all the confidence in the world in Coach Houston. I think next year East Carolina will be up there competing actually for the AAC.
Yeah, speaking of the AAC, looking at the American as a whole, last couple years, it's been UCF, Cincinnati, and Memphis. Do you expect more of the same?
I do. I think those 3 are your top 3 teams this year. And, let me tell you a little thing about the American Conference. In my magazine, I ranked the conferences in the front for the previous year and then the upcoming year. Well, for last year, I actually rated the American Conference ahead of the AAC. It's the first time I rated a Group of 5 conference ahead of a Power 5 conference. The American play was that good last year. I think UCF bounces back, though. Memphis is loaded. Ryan Silverfield stepping into a real good situation, 14 returning starters. And every year I go over the team with Coach Fickle. They're just getting deeper, better, bigger, stronger, faster. They got a good team as well. And then, you look at the rest of the teams, though. SMU, bowl caliber team. Navy, how do you count Coach Niumatalolo out of the picture. Willie Fritz has got a really good program going on with Tulane. Dana Holgerson last year redshirted a bunch of players. They may be the most improved team in college football. 19 returning starters this year. And remember, Rod Carey took over Temple late last year and still got them to 8 wins. And Philip Montgomery, Tulsa is probably one of the more underrated teams out there. They were a missed field goal away from beating Memphis. They were a missed field goal away from, I can't remember the other game. There was another game where they missed a field goal, which could have given them the win. So they were a team that was capable of being a bowl team last year. So it is a big, tough conference. And clearly, I think it's the best Group of 5 conference. And as mentioned last year, I had them ranked number 5 overall.
Phil, one question I had, we have our co-host, Bubba Rosenbaum, join us now, but he'll be with us in just a second with a question. But I had a question as far as the American is concerned. We're obviously going to talk to Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American. What does the American have to do to ever get the, I hate the term Power 5, Autonomous 5. I mean, we're ranked every single year. There's 3 or 4 teams every single year in the top 25. There's the UCF run. We're beating Power 5 teams. What do we have to do, in your estimation? Is that ever going to happen to be considered like Power 6?
I think the possibility exists. I really like what I saw out of the American Conference last year. I didn't think I'd ever rank a Group of 5 over a Power 5 like I did last year, and very impressed with the league play, very impressed with the way these coaches are building the teams. So I don't think they're too far away. A couple more years like last year where the American just shocks everybody in non-conference play and plays like they do. And I think that possibility does exist.
Phil, moving over from the American, for most of our listeners, the next conference that would be of interest would be the ACC. Obviously, Clemson's the cream of the crop there year in, year out. Unfortunately for most of our listeners who are Pirates, Mac Brown's turning North Carolina around. What does it look like in the ACC after Clemson? And I think North Carolina's going to be a team to watch this year.
I think the ACC Coastal is the most improved division in college football this year. I mean, last year, let's face it, the ACC was Clemson and a large, cavernous gap to number 2. Who was number 2 last year? It'd be tough to come up with the second-best team in the ACC last year. Clemson had that large of a lead. But this year, Clemson's challengers get a lot closer, and I think it's mostly out of that Coastal division. You talked about Mac Brown doing a heck of a job in North Carolina. And they've got 17 returning starters this year. They've got a quarterback in Sam Howell, who's among the best in the entire country. All their units, very solid. Chance Surratt at linebacker, etc. North Carolina's got to be considered favorite in the Coastal. And then you got Miami. Miami went out and brings in Houston transfer De'Ara King at quarterback. And quarterback was their problem last year, especially on offense. Problem solved. De'Ara King is just a dynamic athlete that can run and pass, and he's going to bring so much to that offense. We've got a veteran offensive line. They had Gregory Rousseau last year, who had 15.5 sacks. He's back because he was just a freshman last year, and then they add in a Temple transfer in Quincy Roche, and Quincy had 13 sacks last year. So think about those two at your defensive end spots. The secondary looks solid. I think Miami is my number 1 most improved team this year. Virginia Tech, 18 returning starters. Wow, there's a veteran group, number 5 in the country. They're a contender in the Coastal. And then how about Pat Narduzzi? He had guys like Jalen Twyman turn down the NFL. A guy like Paris Ford turned down the NFL. Patrick Jones at defensive end. Those 3 guys turned down the NFL. And last year, he lost his top defensive lineman, Rashard Weaver, prior to the season, along with defensive tackle Camp. They're both back to join in with Twyman and Jones. That's a star-studded defense they have. And every year, Coach Narduzzi's telling me, hey, Kenny Pickett's going to be an NFL quarterback. If he turns into that this year and lives up to Pat Narduzzi's billing, look out for Pitt. So I think those 4 teams are your top 4 teams in the Coastal, and all have greatly closed the gap on Clemson.
Phil, talking about a team in the Atlantic Division that really showed a lot of improvement last season, a guy that we're very familiar with here in the state of North Carolina, and the tremendous job he did at App State, is Scott Satterfield. So talk about that improvement of the Louisville Cardinals in 2019.
Yeah, how remarkable for a first-year head coach to step in, take over a 2-10 team, and then get them to 8 wins like they did. And I don't think they even knew who their quarterback was at the start of the year. They had 2 good ones. Puma Pass got banged up early, and then Mikhail Cunningham came in and took over and was dynamic down the stretch. And then they had a running back like Javion Hawkins, 1,500 yards rushing last year, 5.8 yards per carry. And then they've got the Troika, not only Cunningham and Hawkins, but add in Tutu Atwell at wide receiver, one of the best in the country. They also have Des Fitzpatrick, who's going to be an NFL guy at the receiver spot. Those are some loaded skill players. So you like to know their offensive line is solid? I think their offensive line will be good this year. In fact, Coach Satterfield told me that he felt way better going into this year about the offensive line than he did last year. A lot more bodies that they have this year, and they've got 3 returning starters up front. So they should be explosive offensively, better defensively. They showed some improvement last year, still allowed 440 yards per game, but 8 starters are back this year. And I just love the way Coach Satterfield builds a team. He did a great job at App State and a phenomenal job at Louisville last year.
How long will it take Coach Norvell to turn things down around at Tallahassee?
Well, it would have been nice if he had a spring practice out there, have a full spring. But I like the situation he steps into, actually, because if you follow Coach Norvell, you know that he's best when he's got explosive athletes at running back and receiver. Well, that's solved. He's got DJ Matthews in the slot, Corbin and LeBourne at running back, Scary Terry at wide receiver. He's got the athletes that he needs for his offense. And defensively, how about Marvin Wilson turning down the NFL? I think that was a big shock. He would have been a first-round draft pick. He's back at that nose tackle spot. Florida State has 10 starters back. Now, if you're talking about getting Florida State back to where Florida State was, national title contender, competing with Clemson, it's probably going to take a couple of years to get there. But as far as contending for that number 2 spot in the Atlantic, I think they have a shot this year.
Phil, I wanted to ask you, as far as a friend of our podcast and former ECU head coach and player and alum, Ruffin McNeil, is going to NC State. What do you think about the Wolfpack this year with Dave Doran?
Still scratching my head over why they let Ruffin go after the losing season.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
So are we, Bill.
But yeah, I love talking to Coach McNeil, and I tell you what, he's stepping into a pretty good situation here at NC State. I have a page in my magazine, and we've got all these analytics pages in there, as you know, looking at close wins, close losses, yards per game, things like that. Well, another one I like is the stock market indicator. And the stock market indicator is very bullish on NC State. You're talking about a team that had been to 5 straight bowl games, won 9 games each of the previous 2 years, opened up last year 4-2, and then the floor fell out. And I think a big part of that was quarterback play, which was bad. When I talked to Coach Doran this year, he feels much better about his QBs heading into the year. They now have experience. Devin Leary is a guy that showed a lot of progress last year, very good intangibles. They've got Bam Knight at the running back spot along with Ricky Person. And defensively, I think that's where you're going to see the most improvement for NC State this year. So add it all up, they were number 4 on my most improved list. Big-time stock market indicator. I think NC State's going to surprise some folks this year.
And obviously, one more with the area, obviously, with Duke. What do you think about David Cutcliffe? I know they had a tough year, but do you think they turn things around in 2020?
I think it's going to be tough playing in the division they do. As I mentioned, I think the Coastal is the most improved division in college football. Those 4 teams at the top, Pitt, Miami, Virginia Tech, and North Carolina, are all loaded this year. So much so that Virginia, last year's league champ, is picked 5th. And I think with Duke, they've got some talent there. They did get a nice transfer, and something I'm really looking forward to watch is how Chase Bryce does with this Duke offense, because it's a veteran team. They've got 7 starters on each side of the ball. I think that Cutcliffe has surprised me in past years many times, finishing higher than where I thought they would. But I still have them towards the bottom of the Coastal this year because it's such a stacked division.
Phil, go ahead, Bubba.
Sticking in the state of North Carolina, Phil, moving outside of the ACC, we talked about App State a moment ago when we were discussing Louisville and Scott Satterfield, one of his former assistants, and also he had played for the Apps back in the 90s, had a lot of success there as a player, and then also was on Coach Drinkwitz's staff a season ago, new head coach Sean Clark. So what do you think about that hire? And then also down at Charlotte, Will Healy had an excellent first season, taking the 49ers to their first bowl game. So touch on those two a bit.
Yeah, with Sean Clark, you're talking about a guy who steps into a good situation, as we saw with Lindsey taking over last year. Satterfield built this team where they are just dominant on both sides of the ball. And Zach Thomas is entering, his 17th year at App State? Seems like he's been there forever. And he's their senior starting quarterback. And they got a deep backfield with Harrington and Williams. You look at the receiving core. Hennigan, Sutton, Virgil in the mix, Malik Williams, the offensive line solid. They've got 4 potential all-conference guys on the offensive line in Hand and Hunter, Newsel, and Hodges. The defense is loaded. It's a veteran App State team. They deserve to be favorites in the Sun Belt. They do have to play Wake Forest on the road potentially, and if they do, I think they have a shot at that game. It's early enough, and Wake's a veteran squad. I think Sean Clark's going to do quite well in this first year. Let's put him as the favorites in the Sun Belt. And with Coach Healy, hey, it's club lit, huh? They light that locker room up after every victory, and they were lighting it up last year. It was a heck of a season for Charlotte, getting to a bowl game, and you got to figure year 2 they'll be improved, and they got surprising quarterback play last year out of Chris Reynolds. Chris Reynolds is a guy who, if you're picking guys prior to the game, and you've got 8 guys over there, and you want to pick one for your quarterback, he's probably the 8th guy you're going to pick. He's about 5'10", 192, but he just, when the game is out there on the field, he performs, and I thought Will Healy did a great job in his first year. This year he's got 13 returning starters, second year there. I think they do have a shot at getting back to another bowl game again this year.
Phil, sticking in Conference USA, as we sit here today, August 29th, the Pirates are supposed to start the season with the thundering herd of Marshall in Week 0. Marshall was a bowl team last year, had a great defense, lost a lot off that defense, have a heck of a running game coming back, but as of a couple of days ago, their starting quarterback just decided he's going to transfer out. So what do you make of the herd, and how is that loss of the quarterback going to affect them?
I think that the loss of Isaiah Green is big, because Green is a guy that had been there, started for 2 full years, and is expected to make that third-year jump. Now they're going to be going with a Grant Wells, a redshirt freshman, or a true freshman, and Eli Salmons. So I think if you're an East Carolina fan, that is a big-time move, especially early in the year, because when a first-time starting quarterback goes on the road and starts, it's usually pretty tough, and they're going to have a freshman back there at the quarterback spot. So I like that advantage for East Carolina early on in the season, and that probably dampens any enthusiasm I had for Marshall heading into the year. As you touched on, just 4 returning starters on defense, and now you lose the starting quarterback. I mean, Brendan Knox is tough. Sheldon Evans is tough, both at the running back spot. The offensive line is solid. But if EC can slow down the run and be better against the run than they were last year and put the game in the hands of that freshman quarterback for Marshall, I think they'll be in pretty good shape.
Phil, I wanted to ask you, as far as FAU with Willie Taggart, he had a tough time, obviously, with Florida State, but now he's at FAU in Conference USA, and he has a quarterback, the son of Deion Sanders. How do you think things will be there for Willie?
Well, it's, once again, first-year head coach, no spring practices, got to learn the team, and FAU is coming off a great year. I mean, they went 11-3, blew out SMU in the bowl game 52-28, blew out UAB in the CUSA title game 49-6. Now, the talent is still clearly there. Chris Robeson, a QB, B.J. Emmons, a running back. Those guys are what I call VHTs, or among the highly touted quarterbacks coming out of high school. Robeson, of course, a transfer, as is B.J. Emmons from Alabama. The offensive line looks solid. The defense needs to be rebuilt a little bit. They only have 3 starters back on the D. I don't think they're going to match what they did last year, because it is a first-year head coach with the lack of spring practices. But Florida Atlantic has to still be considered a contender in the CUSA East.
Phil, don't want to take up too much of your time here breaking down East Conference, but one more Conference USA team wanted to ask you about. We have a unique listener base down in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, for various reasons. What do you think of the Golden Eagles this year?
I like what Jay Hobson's coming back. Jack Abraham coming back at quarterback is big. I think his injury at halftime of the bowl game, just on the last play of the first half, really was the difference in them beating Tulane and then losing to Tulane. Remember, they led that thing at the half. But he really likes his running backs that he's got there. He's got Perkins, who's big and strong. In fact, all his running backs big and strong. So they've got good size at running back. It's the strongest they've ever been there at tight end, the deepest they've ever been on the offensive line. The big question for me is going to be JUCOs. Now, traditionally, I talk to all the coaches out there, and I usually throw out my philosophy, which is with JUCOs, it takes them about a half year to get up to speed. Second half of the year, they start performing up to what level you thought, and then the second year, those JUCOs are there. That's the year you get the player you recruited. Well, he's got a lot of first-year JUCOs that are going to be stepping into some starting spots or into the two deep on defense, and how quickly he gets them up to speed is going to be probably the key to how Southern Miss does this year. But you have to consider him a contender. I do believe UAB is loaded. I picked UAB to win the West, but I've got Southern Miss coming in second in the West. I think Hobson's got a good team coming back.
Nationally, Phil, who are your playoff contenders for if we get that far? who do you see in the Final Four, if you will?
Going way out of the box here, guys. Big Ten, I'm going with Ohio State. ACC, I'm going with Clemson. SEC, I'm going with Alabama. And Big 12, I'm going with Oklahoma. I know they'll shock you, but it's
what a gamble.
I pretty much went chalk this year with the top four. But if you're looking for one of those teams to sneak in, okay, I'll throw one of them out there to you. And it's Texas A&M. Now, when I talked to Coach Jimbo Fisher last year, was going over the teams, two things stood out to me: lack of seniors on the team. They were a young squad. And then that schedule. I was like, wow. And as it turns out, they took on 3 number 1 ranked teams in the country, the number 4 ranked team and the number 8 ranked team. And they lost 5 games, as you would expect for a young team taking on 5 top 10 teams. Well, this year, they might play 1 top 10 team. Their schedule drops down to number 66. And as I told Coach Fisher last year when I talked to him, I said, Coach, I'm going to put you on my national cover next year, because this was the year that he was building for. And you look at the fact they've got 15 returning starters. Kellen Mond is back. Offensive line, defensive line, both rank in my top 15. I got the linebackers number 9, DBs number 6. I think Texas A&M going to surprise a lot of folks this year. They are my number 1 surprise team, or non-top 10 team that I think can make the playoff.
Nice. And how one more question for you from me. How much fun is it going to be to watch Mike Leach in the SEC?
Yeah, it will definitely be. How about Leach versus Kiffin in the Egg Bowl? Holy cow. People are lining up to watch that one already. That's going to be a lot of fun. But the one thing I'll point out with Mike Leach is when he went to Washington State, it took him about 2 to 3 years to get that team up to speed. And he's inheriting a run-based team and trying to switch him into a pass-based team overnight. We saw what it did to Arkansas in the SEC. I think he's in for a little bit of a learning year, of a year where the team has to learn his systems. And they didn't have any spring practice.
How patient do you think they'll be with him in Starkville?
What's that?
How patient do you think they'll be in Starkville?
Oh, I think they'll be patient with Mike Leach, and I think everybody's going to cut him slack for this first year, and I think second year he'll get this thing turned around. I think it'll be quicker than he did at Washington State, because I think he's got good talent at Mississippi State.
Phil, one of the things I know you take a lot of pride in is, your biggest turnarounds. We mentioned Louisville earlier. Last year in the American, you had Navy, which was not a surprise to me, going from 3-10 to 11-2. Who are some of your biggest turnarounds this year? And then also, kind of a second part of that, your first year head coaches at that particular school. Who were ones you like?
As far as the biggest turnarounds, I'm going to go with my number 1 most improved team in the country this year is Miami. I think the 2 transfers that they added in De'Ara King and Roche at the defensive end spot are huge to a very experienced team. They were 6-7 last year, a losing year. I think they have a big bounce back. How about Northwestern? 2 years ago, Northwestern was in the Big Ten title game. Pat Fitzgerald was 15-1 against Big Ten teams. Last year, they had 0 quarterback play. I mean, it was horrendous. 0 offense, and they went 3-9. This year, they had Peyton Ramsey from Indiana. They've got a good offensive line coming back. The defense was actually a top 20 defense last year, and they got 9 starters back there. I think Northwestern's going to surprise a lot of folks. So those would be 2 big-time turnaround teams, as well as TCU. I think Gary Patterson, if you look at his 2 losing seasons he's had recently, which are very few, he's bounced back the next year with 11 wins. Now, I don't know if this year you can get to 11 wins, but I think TCU is going to be a vastly upgraded team. And then a head coach, a first-year head coach stepping into a good situation. I think the most excited one I talked to was Todd Graham of Hawaii, which surprised me a little bit. But he's very happy with what he inherited there. He's very happy with what the players' attitudes are and how they expect to win and the talent that he has. So he was almost overjoyous with what he inherited. And then on the flip side of the coin, I'm going to go to Michigan State. And Mel Tucker's in a tough situation. You're talking about a coach that took over a team after the freshmen were signed, only has 10 returning starters, so they're not experienced, had 0 spring practices, putting in a new offense and defense, and really doesn't even know the players. And they've had 3 straight winning seasons. I'm going to say Michigan State has a losing season this year.
Well, that makes perfect sense. In a program like that, you would think that they would be at least a bowl team, but I guess not. Phil, before we let you go, we'll give a chance for you to plug all the publication and everything, the website and the like.
I appreciate that, guys. Once again, now, the Phil Steele magazine, we're not printing the 200,000 we normally do. We only did 50,000 this year. So it's a very limited distribution. If you order it through our offices right now, philsteele.com, we'll ship it out the same day you order it. That is philsteele.com. You can order it and insure yourself with a copy. And once you get one of these in your hands, and I'm going to ask you guys this question, once you get one in your hands, you got to have one the next year, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been buying it for years now. I can't tell you how far back. I never don't buy it.
Yeah, it's something it's used as a reference tool. And if you didn't have your Phil Steele with you, you'd be like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? But the only 2 stores you can go to get it this year are Books A Million and Barnes & Noble. So Barnes & Noble and Books A Million are the 2 bookstores you can get it. And if they're sold out, you can go to philsteele.com. Or if you want, it goes on sale at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, July 24th. But you can get it right now. We send it out priority mail. It goes out 1 to 3 days. So just go to philsteele.com and order it. That's STEELE.
Is it still going to be available digitally through the Apple Store and through Google Play?
Yes, it will this year, and that'll be up any day now, potentially probably by the start of next week, if not over the weekend.
All right. Sounds good, and obviously people can follow you on Twitter and social media and the like, right?
That's right, at Phil Steele 042. That's at Phil Steele 042, and if it's happening in college football, I'm tweeting it.
All right, Phil, what an honor once again. Thank you so much for coming on. It means a lot, and hopefully we'll have some football to talk about, and love to have you on again real soon.
Sounds good, guys. A lot of fun talking football with you today.
Thank you very much to the king of college football, Phil Steele. And by the way, again, folks, we'll make sure that you get your copy. And I know that's really cool. He said there in the interview there, Kyle, that any day that you order it by 1 p.m., they'll send out priority mail, so you get it a day to 3 days.
I ordered mine as soon as we got off the phone with him. And you can go to philsteele.com right now and order it. And I will tell you right now, it's a little more this year. It's $20 and then $7 shipping. So you are going to pay for it if you want it. But it's worth it. It's worth it. If you've never owned a Phil Steele, it ain't like Athlon. It ain't like in Lindy's. It's a whole other level of information. In fact, if you've never picked up a Phil Steele, you may be shocked at the amount of information he gets into that magazine.
It definitely helps, and those of us that are, all 3 of us, it helps when we get it, because that way, looking at schedules, and then it helps you get prepared for the season. And like you said in the interview, it's great. It's like having every single media guide from every school. Was 130 schools into one.
Phil Steele started way back in the day as it's basically a publication for gamblers. So there's a lot of weird things in there that the average fan may not even think about. Trends, how often somebody wins, when it's raining, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. But go ahead, Bob.
As far as Phil Steele's concerned, though, if you're near Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, you can get it there as well.
Yeah,
that's right. And also in the next few days, you'll be able to. I have a hard time. I don't know about you guys. I can read books on definitely.
I heard you could read. That's good, Dave. I'm glad you confirmed it.
No, I am old school when it comes to the Phil Steele magazine. I have to have it in my hands. Where other publications, I wanted to mention that they do have the digital copy coming out the next few days between the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. But for me personally, I'll definitely order it after we get done with the show. I'll order it.
I've downloaded it digitally, and it's actually easier for me to read on my phone because with my vision like it is, I can zoom and all, not just have to rely on reading glasses. But it just doesn't feel right. Every year I end up buying a paper copy anyway.
Hey, and Dave, one other thing I did want to chime in with regarding if you're buying at Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, that is not until it's projected to be a week from today. So July 24th, they'll be available in those two locations. Yeah, we had the opportunity to sit down with American Athletic Conference Commissioner, the first and the only commissioner this league's ever had, Mike Aresco, and let's go to that right now.
Well, anytime you can have our next guest on, Kyle. And Bubba, we're very excited to have the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, Mike Aresco. Commissioner, thank you so much for coming back on with us.
My pleasure, Dave. It's great to be with you and Kyle, and if Bubba gets on as well. Thank you.
Certainly, Commissioner, we wanted to ask you, certainly, I know you don't have a crystal ball. Nobody has the right knowing what's going to happen. If you did, I guess you should place your bets in Vegas. But starting out, how are things right now with the conference and obviously with what's going on with COVID-19?
Well, you're right. I do not have a crystal ball, and so I don't plan to play the lottery today. I just don't know. None of us really knows for sure what the future is going to bring because, again, Dave and Kyle, a month ago we felt pretty good about where we were, with the pandemic subsiding in key states and around the country. Where we are now, we are in we've been proactive the whole time in trying to develop standards so that we could play. But right now we're probably in a little bit of a holding pattern because the next 2 weeks I think are going to tell us a lot. We're hoping that the pandemic does begin to go the other way in states like Texas, Florida, and others. And we're hoping that, with our protocols in place and with, other things that we're doing, that we can continue to move forward one step at a time. The conference has a medical advisory group, and you may have, had heard about that, and they've been advising us as to testing protocols. And as you know, we got ahead of that yesterday and talked about what kind of testing we'll be doing. And it's going to be every bit as rigorous or more rigorous than the so-called A5 conferences. And we view ourselves like them. And I haven't campaigned about, you're all aware of what the conference has done with its P6 initiative. And I think we've suspended it during the pandemic. It just didn't seem appropriate. But in terms of something like this, we want to make sure people understand that we are at that level and that we can do the things we need to do to play if, in fact, we can play. Now, having said that, obviously part of it's going to depend on whether our campuses can reopen safely. If they can't reopen, it's probably unlikely that we'll be playing sports. But I've said all along that if we can create a controlled environment where our players are being tested and they're being given all sorts of guidance and health checkups and all sorts of things, that they could easily, conceivably be better off than if they were home, where they wouldn't be getting that testing and where they could pick up the virus and bring it home and not even know it. At least in our protocols, we've been testing, and if they're on the campus and they're not playing football, they're not in the same protocols. I don't know how they're necessarily better off, and they might, again, a lot of student athletes, 90 to 100% of our football players I know want to play. I think that's probably true of our fall sports teams. And if they can't play, would they, I don't, would they get depressed about it? I don't know what would happen. The point is, you have a lot of things that can happen as a reaction to what you're doing. If we can't play safely, we won't. But I don't think sports is going to be a vehicle. I think that there would be a far less chance that sports would be a vehicle for spreading this as opposed to a lot of other things that would be a vehicle for spreading the virus. So that right now, we'll see in a few weeks. Dave and Kyle whether we can start the season on time. My hope is, though, that we don't make any rash decisions to cancel the season if, in fact, we're not able to start on time in a few weeks. Let's then play it by ear and see whether we might not be able to start later on in September or at the beginning of October, because I do think that spring football is no panacea, and I think spring football could potentially put the 2021 season in some degree of jeopardy, depending on how many games you play and when you play them. I mean, think about it. This is football. We're going to play 20 or 25 games in 8 months or 7 months, and that doesn't include all the practice time. And if you practice in the winter, are you doing something self-defeating because the virus prefers indoors, and in the winter when you could have the virus could still be with us. If we don't learn to deal with it and try to cope with it, then obviously we're going to have to shut everything down. I don't know that that's the answer. I'm trying to be rational about this. I'm not trying to be cavalier at all with the health and safety issues. They're very important, and we've spent months developing rigorous protocols. But there's only so much we can do, and there's always, I guess, some level of risk, but there's some level of risk in everything we do. So that's really where we are. And we'll see. The next couple of weeks, the next month will probably be decisive.
Commissioner, you mentioned the possibility of spring football, I guess, being a last resort. Hopefully, we'll be able to play some kind of football this fall. Let's just say we can't play football this fall. If a vaccine's developed and able to be distributed in January, February, would that be, is that a guarantee at this point? Now, let me word this right. If we don't play this fall, if we can play this spring, would we?
I think we would do everything we can to play some kind of schedule in the spring. That's my sense. That's my sense talking to my colleagues as well. But I don't know. There are a lot of issues with it. First of all, if we don't have a vaccine and the pandemic is still with us, then what will have changed between now and then? Maybe there will be better testing, more rapid testing, and people will feel it's safer to play, next year or in the spring. That's always possible. But without a vaccine, you might end up in the same place you are now. And the other issue with spring is what kind of schedule would you play? We've talked about it with our athletic directors, and we've talked about it with the commissioners and with colleagues, and nobody really knows, how that might work. The Ivy League talked about playing 7 games, a conference schedule in the spring, but that's 7 games. Would we play 8 games? Would we play 10 games? You probably wouldn't have a full season in the spring. Because again, when would you start? Would you start in March? If you played March, April, and part of May, you're already then, you've played a season, and you now have June and July when normally you'd be practicing for next season. You've got to take time off. Our student athletes, our football players would need that rest and recuperation. And then the question is, would you be able to start up practice in August and get started on time in 21? It's a real question that's going to have to be answered. So I think whatever you do in the spring would likely be truncated. I don't want to speculate too much because, again, we don't know. We don't know what kind of schedule we could put together, whether the CFP, how that would work, because even if you played only 8 games, if you had a playoff, somebody's playing another couple of games. So, again, it's not as easy as it sounds. Let's just play in the spring. And again, I don't know what the situation will be. We don't know what the situation will be with the vaccine. We also, again, know that practicing in the winter could be problematic indoors. I don't know that. That's why my point has been all along. Let's see if we can't play in the fall under safe conditions. I think that would be the key. Now,
what if? And I guess everything right now is a what if game, but how will the conference treat it? Is we have 11 playing football members. What happens if 10 can and 1 can't? If for whatever reason that university is not allowed to the campus isn't going to open back up, and maybe their governor won't allow it. How would that be approached? If 1 can't, will none of us, or would we just play without that team?
We've talked about it, and our inclination, I don't know that we've made a final decision, but our inclination would be to play without that team. Unfortunately, we even we've talked about it, that team would not want to hold back the other 10. if 10 could play or 9 could play. We've talked about what the threshold is. What if only 5 could play? What if only 6 could play? At some point, you may not be able to move forward. But if it were a matter of 1 or 2 schools because they're in particular states or they've had major issues, and that begs the other question, there might be disruptions during the season. We fully, appreciate that could happen. And if it does, we would try to set up, a tiebreaker system where teams playing an even number of games, we would have a way of sorting it all out. And because some teams might lose a game. Also, we talked about what's the threshold number of games to play to qualify for our championship at the end of the year. We play 8 conference games. Let's assume we stay at that level. Let's say we can play some non-conference games and we don't have to go to a 10-game all-conference schedule. So we play our 8 conference games, but some schools can't play the full 8 games. Is it 6? Is it 7? What happens if a team is ready to play, but a couple of its opponents can't play? These are all scenarios we have looked at. And at that point, do you convene a committee and make a ruling, and maybe somebody can play even fewer games and still qualify for the championship? We have been working on those protocols. I can't tell you that we've fully completed them, but we'll have them completed before the start of the season, and we'll know just how we're going to handle it, because we do anticipate some. But we also know that positive tests have dropped dramatically once the student athletes have been back on campus so far. Now that doesn't mean that will be the case when a student body is on campus. Obviously right now there are not that many people on campus, but once the student athletes came in and there's been education and they understand that if certain kinds of behaviors are going to put them in jeopardy of getting a virus, and these are not bad behaviors. It's just you can't do things you would normally have done in the absence of the pandemic. And I think I heard from other conferences where their testing rates have gone down too. And that brings up one other point I'd like to make, and that is we tested our student athletes when they came in. If they hadn't come in, they would have had the virus, not known it. Several of them wouldn't have known it. Others had mild symptoms, may have just said, it could be a cold. Who knows? The point is they could have been spreading it, or they could have potentially run the risk of having health issues themselves. Instead, they got screened. They were tested. The ones who were positive were given, health, the necessary health care and isolated. Their contacts were isolated. How is that a bad thing? That was actually, as far as I'm concerned, a good thing. So people say, well, did you bring them in too early? Well, why would you have waited? So they would continue to have the virus and not know it? There are just some things that, to me, don't smack of rational thinking. And I just, this is a hard thing. And I'm fully aware that there might be situations going forward where we just can't play or we just don't feel it's safe enough. But, I do think that, we have to weigh that carefully and try to proceed with the best medical advice.
What has the reaction been from different schools about potentially not being able to play with fans? I mean, I could see that definitely happening.
Oh, Kyle, you were breaking up a bit, but did you ask about fans?
Yeah, there were just how are schools reacting about potentially playing with no fans?
Now I can hear you fine. Thank you. Well, I think that's another case where the medical advice will be, probably decisive. Our medical advisory group is outstanding. It's composed of mostly doctors and some trainers. And, the presidents and chancellors will make final decisions along with their athletic directors. But we'll take the medical advice very seriously. And that's I think, going to determine whether you can have any fans at all in the stadiums, whether you think you can create a situation where the bubble is protected. And the bubble means anyone connected with the game itself. Because we decided not to have bans on the field. That's one way, potentially we could have issues with if the virus were present, spreading the virus. So we decided not to have bans. But on the other hand, and while we haven't made a conference decision, I think most schools have decided that they would probably not be likely to have bans. There might be some situations where you could have a ban, but it wouldn't be on the field necessarily. The Spirit Squads, cheerleaders, we're testing, the people who are handling the game, obviously the players, coaches, the chain crew, the officials coming in, And at that point, you want to make sure that you have what we call a secure bubble. And so if you have fans, you got to make sure there's some separation. And then, of course, the social distancing, the masks, other things. Our ADs have worked hard, though, to try to develop protocols where they could have some level of fan attendance. But at this point, it's very uncertain. You could end up playing with no fans. Nobody knows at this point. First things first, though, the first issue is whether we play at all.
Yeah.
And that's the big one.
Commissioner, I wanted to talk about the league itself. I remember last year I saw you, obviously you came to Greenville for our homecoming game. It didn't turn out for Pirate Nation the way that obviously we wanted to, but I remember you talking that day about how great our league is, and especially now that UConn is gone. I know we don't have football at the moment, but can you talk about how great the league is?
Well, Dave, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, we haven't talked much about that because it's all been about the virus and how we're going to play and if we can play and health and safety protocols. And that's just unfortunate. That's life and we have to deal with what is thrown at us. But in terms of the league, it would, if we can't play, it would be a shame. We have a lot of really good teams. UCF, Cincinnati, Memphis, SMU. I think Houston is going to be among those teams because so many players he has who didn't play last year. These are teams that can play with anyone in the country, and many of our schools can. East Carolina, ECU is still building, but they're getting better, and we would be, interested to see their progress. It's going to be there, no question. UConn struggled in our league, and everyone else, you did not have an easy game in our league. USF with a new coach and some talent there. You look at Tulsa, which could easily have beaten some of our better teams last year if they had field goal kicking kind of did them in. But Tulane is a very rugged team, very hard to play. Navy, of course, you always have to remember Navy because they're just a top program. They beat Kansas State in the bowl game. We had 4 top 25 teams last year, and if SMU had won its bowl game, we probably would have had 5. That's a fifth of the top 25 in our league alone. I mean, this is a powerful league, and again, we have suspended the P6 campaign for now. We'll resume after the pandemic. We just didn't feel it was appropriate. But if we do play, then we can talk about these things again. But again, even if we play, a lot of it's going to be, there's going to be a very big focus on health and safety and monitoring and how we're doing. And that's another thing to point out. This year would be if we do play, it's a very unusual year because the teams that are successful might be the teams that successfully manage, the whole protocol and don't have players out, have players who are able to play that, people. That's going to be key. I mean, what if you have a number of players out, with the virus and with social distancing, you may have to quarantine a number of players. It's an uncertain situation. So this year, whatever happens, if we do play, it's going to be a very unusual year. We all know that, and we may not be able to play the games we normally play. I said the other day that it's disappointing that we may not be able to play some of those big non-conference games. Cincinnati lost a great opportunity at Nebraska because Cincinnati's a terrific team. That's unfortunate. We understand. We respect the decision. We understand why it happened. But as you know, we've made our reputation on winning those big non-conference games, showing that we're just as good as those teams. Whether we can preserve some of those games like TCU, SMU, East Carolina, South Carolina, I don't know whether we can preserve those games yet or not. But if we can, we'll certainly be happy about that. But, again, the league is terrific. I don't think there's any question about it. But so much of this has been, subsumed because of obviously what we're dealing with.
If we do play, Commissioner, and I guess, if we don't, also this question would apply. The new television contract goes into effect this year, a lot more money. If the number of games we play are decreased, and how is that going to affect the TV contract? Are we going to get the same money no matter what? I mean, I'm assuming if we don't play, we don't get the TV money. How is that going to work?
Well, if you don't play, certainly, we I don't want to get into and I don't think ESPN would appreciate it either if I got into the specifics of the event. But yes, we would sit down with our partners at ESPN and we would figure out whatever adjustments we had to make because we lost games. Obviously, ESPN's paying for games that are played. and we may well lose some games. Now we've lost some games in the past for hurricanes and flooding, and ECU's had some issues with weather over the years. And if it's a marginal number, then maybe that you don't have to worry about it. But if it's a bigger number of games and depending on the game, there's a lot that goes into it. We have clauses in our agreement, force majeure clauses. We also have we sit down and we discuss what the value of the games were, how you value football versus basketball, and it brings up another point. If we don't play football, we may not play basketball. We don't know yet. We just don't know what's going to happen. So, yeah, we were excited about the brand-new contract, but even that, we had to temper that excitement because we don't know what's going to happen, and, we'll just have to play it by ear. But we have a great relationship, I would point out, with ESPN, and we talk to them a lot. We just don't know what's going to happen down the road, but we'll sit down with them and figure out a reasonable adjustment that works for both sides if we don't play games.
And last question from me, and then I'll let Dave close it out. What kind of, I guess it'd be different for each school, but if we're not able to play football now and for whatever reason we could play it in the spring, what kind of financial impact would that have for universities in the Americas? I know East Carolina's struggling financially already. I just don't know. I don't know how we would survive an entire year without football.
Well, Kyle, I think we can survive. I think it would be a huge financial, I don't want to use the word catastrophe at this point, but it would be a huge financial hit. There's no question about it. The conference, though, has healthy reserves. We're looking at lines of credit. We're looking at slashing our expenses to the bone if, in fact, we have to. So we've got ways to mitigate some of the damage. But if you play in the spring, then you recoup something. We don't know precisely how that would work, and we'd have to talk to ESPN about it. Maybe we can manage to recoup the whole thing. We don't know. We don't know. The spring football, that's ESPN didn't exactly pay for spring football, but we'd have to work that out with them. But if we lost football entirely for a year and then had to resume in 21, it's an enormous hit because it's the gate, it's parking, it's concessions, it's sponsorship, it's the rights. The TV situation would be in jeopardy. So we're not arguing that it's not a huge hit, and it's a big hit for P5 schools. Where they're talking about $60-70 million in revenue and just their gate. So it's a huge hit. No one's arguing that, and our schools have already suffered from financially from losing the NCAA tournament money this past year, from possibly having student fees. Some rely on student fees. They might not be the same, especially with a lot of online courses this year. There's probably going to be issues regarding sponsorships. Obviously, if you did lose the gate and you lost all the other things, that would be an issue. But they've already lost some things, and they may lose, some more. So it's not a good situation. But right now, again, the conference is healthy, and we can help out our schools. And remember, also expenses have been drastically lower because we didn't play. So that's a mitigating factor, and our schools are hanging in there. In addition, testing is going, if we do play, and if we play, of course, that solves a lot of the problem, but testing is going to be very expensive. We know that. And our schools have been able to deal with it, and they knew they had to. It was never an issue. We knew if we didn't test, we wouldn't play. But the conference, again, is in a position, I think, down the road to help our schools out if things get really, really, dire, and they might. And again, we don't know. If we don't play in 20, is 21 at risk? This pandemic, as Dr. Fauci said, it's going to dictate a lot of what we do and how we are able to proceed. But I'm optimistic that and we may have a vaccine, and that may who knows how quickly it's going to be widespread. And remember, it has to go to the people who need it the most first, and that's just something we have to think about. That was an issue with testing, fellows, a few months ago. Would we have enough tests to go around? We weren't going to take testing away from people that really needed it, but we think now there's probably enough testing, and we think we can get the results back in time. But these are all the kinds of things that sort themselves out as time goes on, which is why I've always said if we can buy time, then we know where we are. And if we have to make hard decisions and they're not decisions we want to make, we'll make them because health and safety are primary and always have been.
And Commissioner, finally, I was just going to say, to add to what you were already saying in Kyle, the very fact of when you mentioned spring football, the logistics of potentially having I don't know how in the world you would have a whole bunch of sports running at the same time. It's already hard on a normal, whatever normal is, a season or seasons plural, and to have football and basketball. Well, there's some overlap, I know, but that would be really difficult I would imagine, for the local universities.
No question about it. We've discussed that. But, there's an old saying I remember from my college days. Edward R. Murrow once said, difficulties an excuse history has never accepted. So I think our schools have said, look, it would be difficult, but we would do it. We would figure it out. But it creates a lot of nuances and things that you're going to have to deal with. TV is not used to having football in the spring. So, they've got a lot of other events going on. So you'd have to work around that. We obviously would have basketball, and if you have the basketball tournament, in March, are you now practicing and playing football? You might have to, beef up the staff, or the staff it's all hands on board. It would be a burden for everyone, but it's something because of the seriousness of the situation and because of the dire circumstances. If you didn't try to do it, we would do everything we can to do it, and I think we would meet the challenge. We would, but no one's arguing it would be easy. You have Olympic sports that would come into play. No one's really sure yet how that would work. But again, if we don't play fall sports, and some conferences have already canceled their fall sports, then it's that becomes front burner, and we spend the same amount of time on that as we've been spending on trying to get our fall sports going. It's been 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, and we're just going to keep at it.
Commissioner, thank you so much for your time. It's an honor to have you on again on the show. We think the world of you, all three of us, myself, Kyle, and Bubba. I think that's safe to say. Thank you for all your hard work with the TV deal, and we're very proud to have you the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference.
Well, Dave, first of all, thanks for those kind words. I mean, your kindness and encouragement, it really means a lot to me, and you've always been great. Thank you, Kyle and Bubba, as well. And also, just one last thing, I just wish the people in the East Carolina community and in the state, of course, around the country, but in your community, good health, and hope everything there is easing up. And there's a larger issue here. If we can play football, the really good news will mean that the pandemic is really subsiding, and that would be the best news of all. So again, thank you for everything, and we'll see what happens in the next few weeks. And also regards to Athletic Director John Gilbert, Ron Mitchelson. Obviously, we're in close touch all the time. Ron's done a great job, in his capacity with the university. He's got a tough job. As I've said, our chancellors and presidents right now have a tougher job than I do, and we appreciate that. And good luck to everyone there.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Aresco. Appreciate him, the visit. He's, tell you what, the best commissioner the league could possibly have. I mean, when you look at the fact that he used to work with ESPN and all the TV deals, and I know maybe he'll feel comfortable. ESPN. CBS, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have the right commissioner, and I don't care what anybody says. We have a great league with all the different people that we have, all the league, as far as the teams in the league, and I think he's done an excellent job. And hopefully we can just get through all the mess that we've got with COVID over the next, like John Bream, our friend, said, and we've heard the Surgeon General. If everybody will wear a mask, we can knock this thing out in 6 weeks.
Yeah, they say if we can get 80%.
It's true.
80%. I don't know if it's true or not, but they say if we can get 80% cooperation, we can get it under control, where the numbers are manageable and minuscule, however you want to say it, in 6 weeks. So I'd like for everybody to wear their mask for the next 6 weeks and see if that holds up. If it doesn't hold up, then I think at that point you got to say there's no point in trying. It's just going to be what it's going to be until there's a vaccine. But in the meantime, let's, for the next 6 weeks at least, wear these masks and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree, Kyle. The very fact that if you want college football, there are a lot of people that live in Eastern North Carolina and a lot of places where they don't believe this exists. They don't believe it can happen to them, whatever the case may be. They're going to the beach in droves. I mean, right now Miami is the epicenter of this pandemic, and because everybody's going to South Beach and everybody's going to party and all that, which is fantastic. But we're in different times, and as long as we continue to act like it's not going to happen, and I know, Kyle, you haven't been going as many places, and I've tried to limit the amount of places that we go.
We try to be smart about it. We did go on vacation to Gatlinburg, and thankfully we didn't get infected while we were there. And and I'm going to be quite honest with you, Dave. I have my doubts on. Do I think it's real? Yeah, I think it's real. Do I believe the numbers that are coming out? No, I don't. I believe that a lot of people are testing positive. I do not believe a lot of people are getting sick. Is it a real thing? Yes. If you're susceptible, like me, I may be susceptible. I'm overweight and have a history of asthma. But the bottom line here is I don't care. At this point, it doesn't matter. At this point, whether you believe it or don't believe it, whether how bad it is or maybe it's not as bad as they're saying, it really doesn't matter because we're at the mercy of our government. And at this point, they're saying wear masks and it'll be under control in 6 weeks. So damn it, do it. And then 6 weeks from now, let's see if it's under control. Then we'll go from there.
That's right. We'll see if it's not a social experiment. It is real. If you don't believe me, just come to the hospital and, well, you can't really, but just trust me in that I've been around those rooms and it's not a pretty thing. And just because every single person is not getting in there not bad off doesn't mean that doesn't exist, and doesn't mean that you can't get it.
It's real. It's real. I think the problem, and we're getting off on the subject that's not involved with football. I think there's been enough. I think there's been so many things that were said that were contradictive in terms of, let's go back to Fauci at first saying we don't need masks. And what he should have said was, we don't have enough masks right now for the general public. So right now we're going to concentrate on masks for the doctors and the nurses. As soon as masks are available for the general public, we're going to get them to the general public because they are desperately needed. Well, when you say masks aren't necessary and then turn around 2 months later and tell everybody to wear masks, they're going to doubt you. And we need to stop with the saying things and then changing it up. We need to be transparent. And that'll help with people that are doubting things.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's one of those things. Everybody's making it's a political year, so of course, everything has to be political. That's why I try not to look at social media as much as I would like to, from all the politics on the left and on the right. We're not going to be the political objective right now, but hopefully we can get through COVID in many different ways. The fear, that we've had, there's the actual disease and the political side of things too. So, but anyway, we have one thing that we've been doing is the 50 Pirates in 50 Days. Folks can see those archived on Facebook, Kyle, and obviously I think we've done 10 out of 50 so far. So what is that, 20% of the Pirates?
Yeah, this morning with Trent Tigner, that was actually number 11.
That's right. So go back and you can check those on archived on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and obviously on our YouTube channel. And then you can actually get notifications so you'll know anytime that you want to watch those 50 Pirates in 50 Days. I know, Bubba, we've got a lot of other great content coming up too.
Yeah, coming up tonight is Greg Gardell, 8 o'clock. And then on Saturday morning, it will be Will Bland, the former East Carolina wide receiver, and then now current Greenville Rose head football coach in his first season, 9 a.m. for that. And then on Sunday at 1, we catch up with Casey Ross, the Pirate cornerback from the Skip Holtz era.
All right, sounds good. All right, we want to thank our great guest, Mike Aresco from the American Athletic Conference, of course, the king of college football. Make sure you get your copy of the Phil Steele magazine. And, of course, I want to thank Bubba and Kyle as well. And until next time, you've been listening to the Sports Objective Podcast.
You've been listening to the Sports Objective Podcast. Join us next time as the guys will be objective, and the objective is sports.